I stood at the altar in my cream-colored dress, hands trembling as I held David's, and listened to him recite the vows we'd written together. The afternoon sun streamed through the chapel windows, casting golden light across the faces of my children, my grandchildren, and the small group of friends we'd invited to witness what I thought was my second chance at happiness. At 68 years old, after 5 years of widowhood, I'd finally allowed myself to believe in love again. David's voice was steady as he promised to cherish me, to stand by me, to love me for the rest of our days. But then he leaned in close, his lips nearly brushing my ear, and whispered words that made my blood turn to ice. "You're a wonderful woman, Margaret, but my heart belongs to someone else in this room." I felt my smile freeze on my face. A few guests chuckled nervously, probably thinking it was some kind of odd joke or that nerves had made him say something strange. My son squeezed his wife's hand, looking confused, but I knew. In that horrible, crystallizing moment, I knew this wasn't a mistake. The ceremony continued in a blur. I said my vows on autopilot, my mind racing through every interaction, every moment that had led to this. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, David kissed me, but his eyes were already searching the crowd behind me. I turned to walk down the aisle, and that's when I saw her, Carol, my best friend of 30 years, my maid of honor. She stood there in her dusty rose dress, tears streaming down her face, and the look she gave David was not the look of a happy friend. It was the look of a woman in love. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Margaret, and I'd spent my entire life being the person everyone could count on. For 40 years, I worked as a pediatric nurse, holding the hands of frightened children and exhausted parents through their darkest moments. When my first husband, John, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I cared for him through 18 months of treatment while still raising our 3 teenagers and working full-time. After he passed, I became both mother and father to my kids, attending every graduation, every wedding, every milestone alone but proud. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. John's life insurance, my pension, our paid-off house, and careful savings meant I could retire with dignity. My children were grown, successful, and starting families of their own. I'd beaten breast cancer at 60. I'd survived loss, illness, and loneliness. I'd rebuilt my life brick by brick, learning to be content with my garden, my volunteer work, and my routines. But contentment isn't the same as happiness. And when I met David at the community center 2 years ago, when he brought me coffee and listened to my stories and made me laugh for the first time in years, I let myself hope. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserved one more chance at the kind of love I'd lost. Carol had been there through it all. She'd held me when John died. She'd driven me to chemotherapy appointments. She'd been the sister I never had. When David came into my life, she'd been the one who encouraged me, who helped me pick out dresses for dates, who told me I deserved to be happy. I never imagined that my second chance at love would become my greatest betrayal, or that my best friend would be the one holding the knife. The 6 months before the wedding were the happiest I'd been in years. Every morning I'd wake up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since John died. I'd make my coffee, walk out to the porch, and tend to the rose garden that John had planted 20 years ago. The roses had survived him, just like I had, and now they were blooming more beautifully than ever. It felt like a sign. David would call me every morning at 8:30, right after his morning jog. "Good morning, beautiful," he'd say, and I'd blush like a teenager even though I was almost 70. We'd talk about nothing and everything, what I was planting that day, what book he was reading, whether we should have chicken or salmon at the reception. These small, ordinary conversations made me feel alive again. After years of silence in an empty house, I had someone who wanted to hear about my day. He'd come over most evenings, always bringing something: fresh flowers from the farmer's market, a book he thought I'd enjoy, or ingredients to cook dinner together. We'd prepare meals side by side in my kitchen, him chopping vegetables while I seasoned the meat, moving around each other with an easy rhythm. He'd tell me stories about his years as a high school English teacher, about the students who'd changed his life, about his own late wife who'd passed from a stroke 7 years ago. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from my porch swing. His hand was warm in mine. "You've given me a reason to wake up excited about life." I squeezed his hand, tears in my eyes. "You've done the same for me." Carol was there for everything. She'd come over with wedding magazines and Pinterest boards, squealing with excitement like we were 25 instead of 68. We'd spend entire afternoons trying cake samples, debating between vanilla buttercream and chocolate ganache. She held my hand when I tried on wedding dresses, crying when I found the perfect one, a simple, elegant cream dress that made me feel beautiful instead of ridiculous. "You deserve this, Maggie," she'd say, using the nickname only she was allowed to use. "After everything you've been through, you deserve to be happy." She helped me address invitations, arrange flowers, and plan the ceremony. When I worried that I was too old for a big celebration, she'd shake her head firmly. "Love doesn't have an age limit. You're getting married, and we're celebrating. Properly." David and Carol got along wonderfully, which made me happier than I could express. My children lived hours away, busy with their own families and careers, so having Carol there to help plan everything meant the world to me. She and David would joke and laugh together while we taste-tested food for the reception. She'd ask his opinion on centerpieces. He'd compliment her organizational skills. "You two are my favorite people," I told them both one evening as we finalized seating arrangements in my dining room. "I'm so lucky to have you." Carol hugged me tight. "We're the lucky ones, Maggie." David kissed my forehead. "She's right. You're the glue that brings people together." My children video called regularly to check on wedding plans, excited to see me happy again. My grandchildren were thrilled to be flower girls and ring bearers. Everything felt perfect. Everything felt right. I'd go to bed each night with a smile on my face, grateful that life had given me this unexpected gift. I should have known it was too perfect. I should have known that happiness this complete doesn't come without a price. 3 days before the wedding, I pulled into my driveway after picking up my dress from the final alterations. My heart was light, my mind already on the honeymoon David and I had planned, a quiet week at a bed and breakfast in Vermont. I grabbed the garment bag carefully, not wanting to wrinkle the delicate fabric, and walked through my front door humming the song we'd chosen for our first dance. The humming died in my throat. David and Carol were in my kitchen, standing close together by the counter, too close. Their heads were bent toward each other, voices low and intimate in a way that made something twist in my stomach. Carol's hand was on David's arm. When they heard me enter, they sprang apart like teenagers caught by a parent, their laughter cutting off abruptly. "Margaret, you're back early," Carol said, her voice pitched higher than normal. Her hand moved to the counter, and I watched as she flipped her phone face down in one smooth, practiced motion. Carol never put her phone face down. She was the person who left her phone screen up everywhere, who never had anything to hide. "The alterations didn't take as long as I thought," I said slowly, studying their faces. David's smile looked strained. Carol was adjusting her hair, not meeting my eyes. "What are you two up to?" "Just finalizing the surprise we planned for the reception," David said, moving toward me and kissing my cheek, but his lips felt mechanical, perfunctory. "Carol's been helping me organize something special for you." "It's going to be amazing," Carol added, finally looking at me. Her smile was bright, maybe too bright. "But we can't tell you or it'll ruin the surprise." I wanted to ask what kind of surprise required them to be standing so close, speaking in whispers. I wanted to ask why Carol had hidden her phone screen. I wanted to ask why the energy in my own kitchen felt wrong, charged with something I couldn't name, but I didn't. Because these were the two people I trusted most in the world. David, who'd brought light back into my life. Carol, who'd held my hand through my husband's death and my cancer treatment. What kind of person was I to doubt them over nothing? Well, I can't wait to see it, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. I held up the garment bag. The dress is perfect. Do you want to see it, Carol? Of course. She moved toward me, and I saw her slip her phone into her purse as she passed the counter. Why was she taking her phone with her? We were just going upstairs to my bedroom. As we climbed the stairs, Carol chattering about last-minute details, I glanced back. David was staring at his own phone, his expression serious, almost cold. It was a look I'd never seen on his face before. Then he noticed me watching, and the warm smile returned instantly. "I'll start dinner," he called up. "Your favorite, chicken piccata." I smiled and waved, then continued up with Carol. But that image stayed with me. That cold, calculating expression in the split second before he knew I was looking. The way Carol had hidden her phone screen without thinking. The guilty spring apart when I'd walked in. "Stop it, Margaret," I told myself firmly as Carol oohed and awed over my dress. "You're being paranoid. These are your people, your family." But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I told myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. Everyone got nervous before their wedding, even at 68. I should have listened to my gut. I should have asked questions. But I was too afraid of looking foolish, too afraid of ruining my own happiness. I spent the next 2 days actively pushing every doubt out of my mind. Whenever that image of David and Carol standing too close crept into my thoughts, I replaced it with memories of David bringing me flowers, of Carol holding my hand during chemotherapy, of all the reasons I had to trust them completely. Carol had been my best friend for 30 years. 30 years. She'd been there when John proposed. She'd been in the delivery room when my youngest was born. She'd sat with me in hospital waiting rooms, had helped me clean out John's closet when I finally found the strength, had talked me through panic attacks at 3 a.m. This was the woman who knew every secret I'd ever had, who'd seen me at my absolute worst and loved me anyway. And David? He was gentle, patient, and kind. He'd waited 3 months before even holding my hand, respecting my grief and my pace. He'd met my children and grandchildren, charming them with his stories and his genuine interest in their lives. He'd fixed my leaky faucet, helped me reorganize my garage, and sat through 4 hours of my grandson's baseball games without complaint. These weren't the actions of a man with ulterior motives. I was just being a ridiculous old woman, I told myself, paranoid and insecure after years of being alone. The next morning I was in the garden when I heard voices from inside the house. I'd given both Carol and David keys months ago. Carol had one for years anyway. I walked toward the back door and heard Carol's voice, low and urgent. "Are you sure about this? Maybe we should just..." "Should just what?" That was David, his tone sharp in a way I'd never heard. I pushed open the door, and once again they jumped apart. Carol's face was flushed. David's jaw was tight. "Everything okay?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Perfect," Carol said quickly. "Just wedding day logistics. I'm worried about the timeline." "It's going to be fine," David said, his voice instantly warm again. He came over and kissed my temple. "Stop worrying, both of you. It's going to be a perfect day." I wanted to ask what Carol thought they should just do. I wanted to know why they kept having these whispered conversations that stopped when I appeared, but I didn't. Because asking meant admitting I didn't trust them. Asking meant being that jealous, suspicious woman. Asking meant potentially destroying the happiness I'd finally found. That afternoon, I caught David texting and smiling at his phone. When he saw me watching, he put it away quickly. "Just my son," he said, confirming he'll be here tomorrow. But I'd seen him texting his son before. He never smiled like that, secretive and warm and intimate. "Everything okay with him?" I asked carefully. "Perfect. He's excited to meet you properly." David pulled me into a hug. "2 more days until I get to call you my wife." I let myself melt into his embrace, forcing away the questions, the doubts, the tiny voice screaming that something was wrong. I was 68 years old. I'd been a widow for 5 years. I'd learned to sleep alone, to eat dinner in silence, to attend family events watching other couples hold hands while I sat by myself. I deserved this happiness. I deserved this love. And I wasn't going to destroy it by being paranoid. Carol arrived that evening with champagne to celebrate our last night before the wedding. As the three of us toasted to the future, I watched them carefully. Maybe I saw Carol's hand linger on David's shoulder a moment too long. Maybe I noticed them exchange a glance I couldn't quite read. Or maybe I was just imagining things because I was scared of being happy. Because deep down, I still couldn't believe someone like David would choose someone like me. I drained my champagne and poured another glass. Tomorrow was my wedding day. Everything was going to be perfect. It had to be. I couldn't sleep. The night before my wedding, lying in the bed I'd shared with John for 35 years, I stared at the ceiling and tried to calm the anxious flutter in my chest. It should have been excitement, bride-to-be jitters, but it felt more like dread, like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark, sensing the drop but unable to see it. 2:30 in the morning, I gave up. I threw back the covers and patted downstairs in my nightgown, thinking a glass of warm milk might help. David was staying at my son's house for the week. We'd joked about not seeing each other before the wedding, keeping some traditions even at our age. Carol had left around 10, promising to be back early to help me get ready. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the settling creaks of old wood. I poured milk into a saucepan and turned on the stove, watching the blue flame flicker in the darkness. That's when I saw it, a light glowing from the guest room at the end of the hall. I frowned. No one was staying there tonight. I walked toward it, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, and pushed open the door. David's phone was on the nightstand, screen illuminated. He must have left it here earlier when he'd come by to drop off his suit. The screen was still lit, showing a new text notification from C. My breath caught. C with a heart emoji. Carol's name was saved in my phone as Carol with a coffee cup emoji because of our morning coffee tradition. Why would David have a heart? The preview showed on the lock screen. Tomorrow changes everything. I can't wait anymore. After all this time, we'll finally... My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. I shouldn't look. This was an invasion of privacy. But that voice in my gut, the one I'd been silencing for days, was screaming now. I knew his passcode. We'd chosen it together, the date we planned to celebrate as our anniversary. June 15th, 06:15. The phone unlocked. I opened the message thread with C, and my entire world collapsed. Months of messages, hundreds of them. I scrolled up with trembling fingers, barely breathing, each text another knife to my heart. David. I can't stop thinking about last night. The way you taste, the way you feel. C. She almost caught us yesterday. We need to be more careful. David. Just 2 more weeks, then we're married and everything is in motion. C. I feel guilty sometimes. She trusts me completely. David. Don't go soft on me now. Remember what we're doing this for. 6 months after the wedding, we file for divorce. She'll be devastated. Probably won't even fight it. She's so desperate for love, she'll sign anything. C. And then we'll have access to everything? The house, the accounts, the life insurance? David. Everything. She already added me to her life insurance policy last month, made me joint on her checking account. After we're married, I'll work on the rest. The house, the pension, all of it. Then we disappear and start our real life together. C. I love you so much. This has been the hardest year of my life pretending to be happy for her. David. I love you too. Just a little longer. Tomorrow I marry her, but my heart has always belonged to you. I dropped the phone on the bed, both hands clutching my chest. The room spun. I couldn't breathe. My best friend. My husband-to-be. The 2 people I trusted most in the entire world. They were going to destroy me. Together. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in that guest room with David's phone in my hands until dawn, broke through the windows, reading every message, seeing the evidence of their months-long affair and conspiracy laid out in brutal detail. But I didn't cry. Something had hardened inside me during those dark hours. I took photos of everything with my own phone, every text, every message, every piece of their plan. Then I found the voicemails. There were dozens. I played one, then another, hearing David's voice say things to Carol that he'd never said to me. But the last one, left just yesterday afternoon, was the worst. I saved it. Then I placed his phone back exactly where I'd found it, went upstairs, and got ready for my wedding. Carol arrived at 8 with coffee and pastries, her smile bright and false. "It's your wedding day," she squealed, hugging me. I hugged her back, feeling nothing. "I'm so grateful you're here," I said, and watched guilt flicker across her face. She helped me into my dress, zipped it up, pinned flowers in my hair. The entire time she chattered about how beautiful I looked, how lucky David was, how happy she was for us. I responded mechanically, watching her in the mirror, this stranger wearing my best friend's face. At the chapel, I walked down the aisle alone. My father had died years ago, and I'd chosen to walk myself. David stood at the altar in his gray suit, looking handsome and distinguished. When I reached him, he took my hands and smiled. We said our vows. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, and then David leaned close and whispered those words that confirmed everything. "You're a wonderful woman, Margaret, but my heart belongs to someone else in this room." People chuckled nervously. My son looked confused, but I kept my face neutral, my hands steady. When the officiant pronounced us married, David kissed me. Over his shoulder, I saw Carol wiping tears from her eyes, and I knew they weren't tears of joy for me. The reception began. Our first dance was supposed to be to Unforgettable by Nat King Cole. How sickeningly appropriate. David took my hand and led me to the dance floor. The music started. He put his arms around me, and we began to move. But his eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on Carol, standing at the edge of the dance floor in her dusty rose dress. The longing in his gaze was unmistakable. Carol stared back at him, her expression full of pain and desire. Everyone was watching us, smiling, taking photos and videos. The perfect, happy couple. I stopped moving. David's attention snapped back to me. "Margaret?" I stepped out of his arms and walked to the DJ booth. My son stood up, concerned. "Mom, I'd like to share something special with everyone," I announced, my voice carrying across the silent room. I turned to the DJ, a young man my grandson had recommended. "Please play the audio file I gave you earlier." David's face went white. "Margaret, what are you—" "This is a voicemail my husband left yesterday," I said clearly, watching his expression crumble. "I think everyone should hear it." The DJ pressed play. David's voice filled the reception hall through the speakers, intimate and conspiratorial. "Carol, I can't wait any longer. Tomorrow I'll be legally married and will have access to her accounts, her properties, the life insurance she listed me on. Give me 6 months to gain her complete trust, then we'll file for divorce. She'll be devastated, probably won't even fight it. She's so desperate for love, she'll give me anything. Then we'll finally be together. Everything we've planned for is almost here. I love you, not her. She's just the key to our future." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts. My son lunged toward David, but his wife held him back. Carol had collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. David stood frozen in the center of the dance floor, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. "Margaret, please, let me explain," he started, his voice desperate. "Explain?" I cut him off, my voice like steel. "Explain which part? The affair with my best friend? The plan to steal everything I've worked for? Or maybe you'd like to explain who you really are?" His face went from white to gray. "What are you talking about?" I pulled a manila folder from beneath my bouquet. I'd hidden it there before walking down the aisle. My hands didn't shake as I opened it. Last night, after I found those messages, I couldn't sleep. So I called my grandson, Jake. You remember Jake, the cybersecurity analyst who works for the FBI? David took a step backward. Jake ran a background check, a real one. I pulled out the first document. Your name isn't David Morrison, is it? It's David Moretti. You changed it legally 7 years ago. I looked up at him. Right after you were released from prison for fraud. The room went dead silent. My daughter covered her mouth. Carol's head snapped up, her tear-stained face showing confusion. That's not all. I pulled out another document, my voice growing stronger with each word. Jake found 3 other women, 3 other widows, all between 60 and 75 years old. Linda Martinez in Arizona, married you in 2019, divorced 6 months later after you drained her retirement account, $230,000. Patricia Chen in Oregon, married 2021, you left with her late husband's life insurance payout, $400,000. Rebecca Walsh in Colorado, married 2023, you took her home in the divorce settlement and sold it immediately, $500,000. Carol stood up slowly, her face transforming from grief to horror. What? No, that's not. David, tell her that's not true. I turned to her, and for the first time since the voicemail played, I let my anger show. You didn't know, did you? You thought you were his partner, his real love, the one he was choosing over me. We are partners, Carol said, but her voice wavered. David and I have been together for over a year. We're in love. He was just marrying you to steal my money and move on to the next mark, I finished. Just like he did with the others. Tell me, Carol, how much of your divorce settlement did you loan him last year? Her face went white. $50,000? I guessed, watching her reaction. Maybe more? Did he tell you it was for a business investment? That you'd get it back with interest after we were married? He said it was for his son's medical bills, Carol whispered. His son needed surgery. David doesn't have a son, I said flatly. Jake confirmed it. No children, never did. Carol turned to David, her expression breaking. You told me your son was in the hospital. You showed me pictures. Stock photos, I said. Jake traced them back to a medical website. David's facade finally cracked. The gentle, loving man disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. You think you're so smart, you old bat? You have no idea what you're talking about. I'll sue you for defamation. I'll take everything in the divorce and— There won't be a divorce, I said calmly, because this marriage is going to be annulled on the grounds of fraud, and you're both going to prison. The police came. They escorted David and Carol out in handcuffs while guests stood in stunned silence, some filming on their phones, others crying, many just staring in disbelief. My children surrounded me, asking if I was okay, offering to take me home, their voices blending into background noise. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things. Yes, I was fine. No, I didn't need anything. Yes, we should send everyone home. I held myself together through it all, through my daughter canceling the caterer, through my son arguing with the venue manager about refunds, through my grandchildren asking why grandma's friend was arrested. I answered questions for the police officer who took my statement. I forwarded Jake's research files and the photos from David's phone. I signed papers. I made decisions. And then everyone left. The venue gave me an hour to collect my things before they closed. I stood alone in the reception hall, still wearing my wedding dress, surrounded by untouched food and wilting centerpieces. White roses I'd chosen because John had given me white roses on our first date. Candles flickering on tables where no one had eaten. A 3-tier cake with 2 figurines on top, an older couple holding hands, that Carol had special ordered because she said it would be perfect for us. That's when I broke. I sank into a chair, my carefully arranged hair falling loose, and the sobs came from somewhere deep and primal. They tore through me in waves, each one more devastating than the last. I cried for the fool I'd been. I cried for the dream I'd lost, but most of all, I cried for Carol. 30 years. 30 years of friendship, and it had all been a lie. At least this past year had been a lie. How long had she been planning this? When did she decide that our friendship was worth less than money? When did she look at me, her grieving, cancer-surviving, widowed best friend, and see a mark instead of a person? I remembered her holding my hand in the oncology ward, telling me I was strong enough to beat cancer. Had she been calculating my net worth even then? I remembered her helping me sort through John's clothes, crying with me as we packed away his life. Had she been making notes about what I owned? I remembered every coffee date, every late-night phone call, every moment I'd trusted her with my deepest fears and hopes. She'd known I was lonely. She'd known I was desperate for companionship. She'd known exactly how vulnerable I was, and she'd used it against me. The betrayal from David hurt. Of course it did. But David was a stranger who'd lied from the beginning. Carol was the woman who'd known me at my best and my worst. She'd been at my wedding to John. She'd held my babies. She'd mourned with me and celebrated with me and been woven into every significant moment of my adult life. How could she do this? How could she look me in the eye every single day, help me pick out my wedding dress, do my hair this morning, hug me and tell me she was happy for me, all while planning to destroy me? I looked down at my wedding ring, the symbol of a marriage that had lasted less than 3 hours. I thought about John, my first husband, the man who'd loved me genuinely for 35 years. What would he think of me now? Foolish Margaret, so desperate for love that she'd walked straight into a con. I pulled off the ring and set it on the table next to a piece of uneaten wedding cake. My mascara had run down my face in black streaks. My carefully curled hair was a mess. My cream dress had a stain from where I'd spilled champagne during the confrontation. I was 68 years old, sitting alone at my own wedding reception, destroyed by the 2 people I'd trusted most. I woke up the next morning still wearing my wedding dress. I'd driven myself home sometime after midnight, stumbled through my front door, and collapsed on the couch without bothering to change. My body ached. My eyes were swollen nearly shut from crying. My throat was raw. For a long moment, I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of humiliation and betrayal pressing down on my chest like a physical thing. It would be so easy to stay here, to pull the covers over my head and let the world move on without me, to be the victim everyone would pity. Poor Margaret, conned by her best friend and a career criminal. Poor Margaret, too desperate and lonely to see the truth. Then I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. My wedding dress was wrinkled and stained. My carefully styled hair was a rat's nest. Mascara streaked my face in dark rivers. I looked like exactly what David and Carol had counted on me being, a pathetic old woman, broken and defeated. Something ignited in my chest. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting, and walked to the mirror. I looked at myself, really looked. Past the ruined makeup and disheveled dress, I saw the woman who'd raised 3 children alone after becoming a widow, the woman who'd worked double shifts as a nurse to put those children through college, the woman who'd fought cancer and won, the woman who'd survived losing the love of her life and rebuilt herself piece by piece. I'd survived John's death. I'd survived cancer. I'd survived raising teenagers on one income and navigating grief that felt like drowning. I sure as hell wasn't going to let 2 con artists be the thing that broke me. I unzipped the wedding dress, let it fall to the floor, and stepped over it. I walked upstairs, took the longest, hottest shower of my life, washing away the tears and the shame and the image of myself as a victim. When I emerged, I pulled on jeans and a sweater, armor for war, not romance. Then I made coffee and started making phone calls. My children arrived within 2 hours. I told them to bring every legal document related to my finances. The property deed John had left me, bank statements, investment accounts, insurance policies, everything. They came with their spouses, their faces etched with worry and anger. "Mom, are you okay?" my daughter asked, reaching for me. I held up a hand. "I will be." But right now, I need to think clearly, and I need your help. I spread the documents across my dining room table. I want everything your father left me documented. Every asset in my name, every account, every property deed, every investment. I want a complete financial inventory. Why? My youngest son asked. Because I'm going to make absolutely certain that David Morrison, or Moretti, or whatever his real name is, doesn't get a single penny of what your father worked for, what I worked for. My eldest son, always the protector, clenched his jaw. What do you need us to do? Help me build a case, not just against David, but against Carol too. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I picked up my phone. And I need Jake's help again. If David did this to 3 other women, there might be more. I want to find them all. My daughter looked at me with something like awe. Mom, you're really doing this? I met her eyes and my voice didn't waver. They picked the wrong widow to con. I survived your father's death. I survived cancer. I sure as hell am not going to let them win. I took a breath. Now, someone get me my lawyer's number. We have work to do. My lawyer, Patricia Chen, no relation to David's Oregon victim, arrived at my house within 3 hours of my call. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd handled John's estate and my will. She sat at my dining room table reviewing the evidence Jake had compiled, her expression growing darker with each page. Margaret, this is extensive fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, conspiracy. She looked up at me. With what you have here, we can bury them both. That's exactly what I want, I said. But I need more than a criminal case. I want to contact his other victims. I want a class action civil suit. I want every penny recovered and every crime prosecuted. Patricia nodded slowly. I'll need to bring in a colleague who specializes in elder fraud cases. This is going to be expensive. I don't care about the cost. Use whatever you need from my accounts. I leaned forward. They thought I was a lonely old woman who'd roll over and accept being conned. I want to prove them spectacularly wrong. Jake worked from my spare bedroom, turning it into a command center with his laptop and 3 monitors. Within 2 days, he'd tracked down not just the 3 women I knew about, but 2 more David had targeted before changing his name. 5 women total. 5 lives he'd devastated for money. I called each of them personally. Linda Martinez in Arizona cried when I explained what had happened to me. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was stupid for not seeing it coming. You weren't stupid, I told her firmly. He was a professional. But now we're going to stop him from ever doing this again. Patricia Chen in Oregon, the lawyer's unfortunate name twin, had lost everything and was now living with her daughter. I want justice, she said, her voice hard. Whatever you need from me, you have it. One by one, they agreed to join the case. Together, we'd lost over $1 million to David Moretti's schemes. But more than that, he'd stolen our ability to trust, to hope, to believe that love was possible in our later years. While Jake gathered digital evidence, I made another discovery. Going through the paperwork David had left at my house, he'd planned to move in after the honeymoon, I found documents I'd never seen before. My signature was on them, but I'd never signed them. Patricia, look at this, I said during one of our strategy sessions. This is a quitclaim deed attempting to add David's name to my house, but I never signed this. She examined it closely under a light. This is a forgery, and not even a good one. Your signature slants differently. She looked at me with fierce satisfaction. Margaret, this is attempted fraud. This happened the day before your wedding. See the date? This is a separate felony charge. He was planning to steal your house right from under you. Jake traced David's financial records. Apparently, the man wasn't as careful with digital security as he should have been. Grandma, look at this. He has offshore accounts. Bank transfers to Carol Henderson going back 18 months. She wasn't just his accomplice, she was his business partner. She received 40% of every con. So Carol hadn't been manipulated or fooled. She'd been a willing, active participant all along. That somehow made it worse. But I didn't cry anymore. I channeled everything into the plan. I set up a website documenting David's crimes, with testimony from all 5 victims. I contacted local news stations. The story of a widow exposing her con artist groom at her own wedding was exactly the kind of human interest piece they loved. I filed complaints with the FBI's Elder Fraud Division, the State Attorney General, and every relevant consumer protection agency. And I froze every single one of my accounts, secured every asset, and changed every password and security question. By the time the preliminary hearing arrived 2 weeks later, I had an army behind me. 5 victims, a team of lawyers, my family, and a mountain of irrefutable evidence. David and Carol thought they were hunting a lonely old woman. They had no idea they'd awakened something far more dangerous, a mother protecting what her family had built. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they should have. 2 weeks after my wedding, that wasn't. I stood outside the county courthouse in a navy blue suit, my children flanking me on either side. Behind us stood Linda, Patricia, Rebecca, Susan, and Diane, David's 5 previous victims, women I now considered sisters in survival. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Anderson, how do you feel seeing your husband in court today?" "Margaret, what do you want to say to other seniors about romance scams?" My lawyer, Patricia, touched my arm. "You don't have to answer anything." But I wanted to. I stepped forward and the crowd quieted. I'm here today not just for myself, but for every widow, every widower, every person who dared to hope for love again and was betrayed for it. What happened to me wasn't about romance, it was about predators targeting vulnerable people, and I'm here to make sure it stops. The courtroom was packed. My entire family filled 2 rows. The other victims sat with their families. News reporters occupied the back benches. I could feel the weight of all those eyes, all that expectation. Part of me wanted to run, but the stronger part, the part that had spent 2 weeks building this case, walked through those doors with my head high. David and Carol arrived in separate police transports, both in handcuffs, both looking diminished in their orange jumpsuits. David's distinguished gray hair was unwashed and disheveled. Carol wouldn't meet my eyes as officers led her to the defendant's table. They were seated apart, no longer partners in crime, just 2 people trying to save themselves. The judge entered, a stern black woman in her 60s named Judge Victoria Harrison. I'd learned she'd presided over several high-profile elder abuse cases and had a reputation for harsh sentences. When she looked at the defendants, her expression was cold steel. "The state versus David Moretti and Carol Henderson," the bailiff announced. "Charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, forgery, and theft by deception." The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Amanda Rodriguez, stood. "Your Honor, the state has extensive evidence of a systematic, multi-year scheme to defraud elderly victims. We have 5 documented victims, financial records, recorded conversations, and forensic evidence of forgery. This isn't a simple case of a relationship gone wrong. This is organized crime targeting our most vulnerable citizens." David's public defender, a tired-looking man who'd clearly drawn the short straw, stood. "Your Honor, my client maintains that this was a genuine relationship that deteriorated. The alleged evidence consists of private conversations taken out of context." "Out of context?" Amanda cut in. She pressed a button and David's voice filled the courtroom from the speakers. "She's so desperate for love. She'll give me anything. She's just the key to our future." The courtroom murmured. David's face flushed red. Amanda continued, displaying bank records on the screen. "Mr. Moretti has targeted 5 women over 7 years, stealing a combined total of $1.3 million. Ms. Henderson received 40% of every fraudulent transaction. This wasn't passion, it was profit." Carol's lawyer, a woman who looked deeply uncomfortable, stood. "Your Honor, my client was manipulated by Mr. Moretti. She believed they were in a genuine relationship. She was a victim herself. A victim? Amanda pulled out another document. Ms. Henderson has her own bank account with deposits totaling $520,000. She has offshore accounts. She has property purchased with stolen funds. She was a willing, active participant in every con. Carol's face crumpled, but I felt no sympathy, only cold satisfaction. Judge Harrison's expression hardened. I've reviewed the evidence. Before we proceed to sentencing recommendations, this court will hear victim impact statements. Her eyes found mine across the courtroom. Mrs. Anderson, would you like to speak first? I stood, my legs steady, my voice ready. The moment I'd been preparing for had finally arrived. I walked to the front of the courtroom, feeling the weight of every eye on me. My hands didn't shake as I unfolded my prepared statement, but then I set it aside. These words needed to come from my heart, not a page. Your Honor, I began, my voice clear and strong. David Moretti and Carol Henderson didn't just steal money from me. They tried to steal something far more valuable. My ability to trust, to hope, to believe that I deserved happiness. After my first husband died, I spent 5 years learning to live alone. I learned to be content, even happy, with my own company. And then David came along and made me believe I could have love again. I turned to look directly at David. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. You studied me like a predator studies prey. You learned what I wanted to hear and fed it to me piece by piece. You made me feel beautiful, valued, seen, and every moment of it was a calculated lie. I shifted my gaze to Carol. And you knew every wound I carried, every insecurity, every fear. You'd held my hand through my husband's death and my cancer treatment. You knew exactly how to position David as my savior because you'd been there for every moment that broke me. Carol was crying now, but I felt nothing. But here's what you both didn't know. I pulled out a document from my folder. Every penny you tried to access, I had already moved it. The morning after I found those text messages, before my wedding, I met with my lawyer at 6 a.m. Everything, my accounts, my property, my assets, was secured in irrevocable trusts for my grandchildren. The house you tried to forge documents for, I deeded it to my daughter 12 hours before you attempted the forgery. David's face went ashen. Carol looked confused. You had nothing to steal from me because I made sure of it. The life insurance policy, beneficiaries changed. The joint checking account, emptied and closed. You walked into my wedding thinking you'd trapped me, but I'd already built a cage around you instead. The courtroom was dead silent. But here's the real twist. I pulled out another document holding it up. Carol, remember that $50,000 you loaned David last year? The money from your divorce settlement that he said was for his son's medical emergency? Carol's expression shifted from grief to confusion. What about it? There is no son. There never was. And that money you willingly gave him. I handed the document to the prosecutor. He forged your signature on the bank withdrawal. You didn't loan it to him. He stole it from you while you were sleeping. I have the bank records right here, showing the signature doesn't match your other transactions. The bank's fraud investigation confirmed it yesterday. Carol's face transformed from sadness to absolute shock. She turned to David, her voice rising. What? You said that was for medical bills. You showed me pictures of your son in the hospital. You said, stock photos from a medical website, I said coldly. David doesn't have children. He never did. You weren't his partner, Carol. You were just another mark. He was playing both of us. Carol lunged toward David, restrained by her lawyer and the bailiff. You bastard! I gave you everything. I betrayed my best friend for you. I destroyed 30 years of friendship for a con artist who was conning you too, I finished. You see, Carol, the difference between you and me? I was a victim. You chose to be a villain, and now you get to pay the price for both. Judge Harrison slammed her gavel. Order! The court will come to order. But the damage was done. The partnership had imploded, and everyone in that courtroom had witnessed it. Judge Harrison sentenced David Moretti to 8 years in federal prison, 8 years for elder fraud, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy. She looked at him with undisguised contempt as she read the sentence. Mr. Moretti, you are a predator who systematically targeted vulnerable women in their golden years, women who had the courage to open their hearts again after loss. You didn't just steal their money, you stole their dignity, their trust, and their faith in humanity. This court finds your actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum sentence. David's face was blank, emotionless. Even in defeat, he showed no remorse. Carol Henderson received 5 years as an accomplice and active participant. Her lawyer's attempts to paint her as another victim fell flat in the face of overwhelming evidence. The offshore accounts, the systematic withdrawals, the documented communications showing her role in every con. Ms. Henderson, Judge Harrison said, her voice heavy with disappointment, you betrayed a 30-year friendship for money. You stood by Mrs. Anderson through cancer, through widowhood, through her darkest moments, and then you used that intimate knowledge to destroy her. That level of betrayal deserves no leniency from this court. Carol sobbed through the sentencing, but I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just emptiness where 30 years of friendship used to live. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. David's offshore accounts were seized. Carol's property, purchased with stolen funds, was liquidated. Every penny would be returned to the women they'd destroyed. But the real victory came 3 months after the trial. The other victims and I filed a successful class action lawsuit, recovering $400,000 in additional damages. More importantly, our case became the catalyst for new state legislation, the Senior Financial Protection Act, requiring additional verification steps for major financial changes involving individuals over 65. Local news covered the story extensively, then national outlets picked it up. Widow exposes. Con artist groom at wedding went viral. I was interviewed by news stations, invited to speak at senior centers and community groups across the state. Women and men reached out, sharing their own stories of being targeted by romance scams. I started a blog called Second Chances, Second Looks, documenting my experience and providing resources for seniors navigating late-life relationships. I partnered with AARP to create educational materials about financial safety and red flags in new relationships. What began as my personal tragedy became a mission to protect others. My children, initially devastated and worried about my emotional state, watched me transform. My daughter told me 6 months after the trial, "Mom, I was so afraid this would break you, but instead, you became stronger than ever." She was right. I had become stronger, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of what I'd chosen to do with it. I sold the house. It held too many memories of David's lies. I bought a smaller place closer to my grandchildren with a garden where I could plant new roses, not to replace the ones John had planted, but to symbolize new growth, new beginnings. A year after my wedding disaster, I stood in my new garden, surrounded by my children and grandchildren, celebrating my 69th birthday. We planted a rose bush together, a deep red variety called Resilience. To Grandma, my oldest grandson toasted, the strongest person we know. I looked around at the faces of the people who actually loved me, who'd stood by me through the nightmare, who'd helped me rebuild. I'd thought I needed romantic love to be complete, but standing there, surrounded by real love, messy, imperfect, genuine family love, I realized I'd been complete all along. I didn't need someone else to make me whole. I was already whole. I always had been, and that realization was worth more than any romance could ever be. 2 years have passed since the wedding that never was. The roses in my garden have bloomed through 2 full seasons now, each year more vibrant than the last. I've learned something profound in that time, that healing isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending the pain never existed. It's about choosing to grow anyway, even in soil that's been poisoned by betrayal. I still think about Carol sometimes, not with anger anymore, but with a strange kind of sadness for who she became. Somewhere along the way, she looked at our 3 decades of friendship and decided it was worth less than money. That's not a reflection of my value. It's a reflection of her character. I've made peace with the fact that the Carol I loved probably never existed, at least not in the way I believed she did. David sends letters from prison occasionally. Appeals for forgiveness, claims of rehabilitation, attempts to rewrite history. I don't read them anymore. My lawyer handles them. He lost the power to hurt me the moment I stopped giving him space in my thoughts. The other women I met through this nightmare have become genuine friends. We meet monthly for coffee, sharing not just our stories of survival, but our lives moving forward. Linda started a nonprofit helping fraud victims navigate the legal system. Patricia wrote a book about her experience. Rebecca became a volunteer advocate for elder abuse prevention. We turned our pain into purpose. I've learned that loneliness is not the same as being alone. Loneliness is what made me vulnerable to David's manipulation, that desperate ache for connection, the fear that I'd missed my last chance at happiness. But being alone? That's just a state of being, and it doesn't have to be lonely. I'm surrounded by people who genuinely love me. My children, my grandchildren, my new friends, the community I've built through advocacy work. I've also learned that there's no age limit on being targeted. Con artists don't care if you're 68 or 88. They look for vulnerability, for isolation, for that flicker of hope that can be manipulated into trust. And they're getting more sophisticated every year. The best defense isn't suspicion of everyone, it's education, awareness, and the courage to trust your instincts when something feels wrong. If I could go back and tell myself one thing from that night when I found those text messages, it would be this. Your gut knew before your heart was ready to accept it. Listen to that voice. It's trying to protect you. Greed destroys everything it touches, relationships, trust, and the humanity of those who chase it. Carol traded 30 years of genuine friendship for money that's now gone, and she'll spend years in prison knowing she betrayed someone who truly loved her. David spent decades perfecting his con, and now he'll grow old behind bars, never experiencing authentic connection because he was incapable of offering it. But perhaps the deeper lesson is this. Being vulnerable enough to hope for love is not weakness, it's courage. I wasn't foolish for believing in second chances. I was human. What happened to me wasn't my fault. The shame belongs entirely to those who exploit trust for profit. We live in a world where elder fraud costs Americans over $3 billion annually. Behind every statistic is a real person, someone's mother, grandmother, father, or friend, who dared to hope and was punished for it. But we can change that through awareness, through community, through refusing to let predators make us afraid to live fully. What would you have done if you discovered this betrayal on your wedding day? Would you have exposed them publicly or handled it differently? Have you or someone you love ever been targeted by a romance scam? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might save someone else from making the same mistake. If this story moved you, please share it with the seniors in your life. Send it to your parents, your grandparents, your friends who are navigating dating after loss. Knowledge is protection, and awareness is prevention. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell for more true stories of survival, justice, and resilience. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages. Remember, you are never too old to start over. You are never too broken to rebuild. And you are never too hurt to hope again. You just need to hope wisely, with eyes wide open and people you trust watching your back. Thank you for listening to my story. May you never need it, but if you do, may you find the strength to fight back just as fiercely. Stay strong, stay aware, and never let anyone make you feel foolish for believing in love,